Welcome back to Learn with Professor Janula. If you're a nursing student, this channel is just for you. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Today we're learning about embryological development. So go ahead, subscribe, and let's get started. Dear students, first let's understand the definition. Embryological development is the process by which a fertilized egg develops into an embryo and later into a fetus. In simple words, it is the journey of the baby from the time fertilization occurs until it grows and develops inside a mother's uterus. This process begins with fertilization, which is the union of the sperm and the ovum. After fertilization, the baby starts growing step by step. Initially, it is called an embryo, and as it continues to develop, it becomes a fetus. Now, let's discuss the first stage of embryological development, which is fertilization. This is the beginning of a new life. So what is fertilization? Fertilization is the union of the sperm from the father and the ovum, or egg, from the mother. When these two reproductive cells fuse together, a new life begins. Now, where does fertilization usually occur? It usually takes place in the ampulla of the fallopian tube. This is the widest part of the fallopian tube and is the most common site where the sperm meets the ovum. This is a very important point for your exams, so remember that the ampulla of the fallopian tube is the normal site of fertilization. After the sperm and ovum unite, they form a single cell called the zygote. The zygote is the very first cell of the new baby. From this one cell, all the organs and body systems will eventually develop. Another important point is that the zygote contains 46 chromosomes. It receives 23 chromosomes from the mother through the ovum, and 23 chromosomes from the father through the sperm. Together, they make a total of 46 chromosomes, which is the normal chromosome number in humans. Now here's another interesting fact. The sex of the baby is determined at the time of fertilization. The ovum always carries an X chromosome, while the sperm can carry either an X chromosome or a Y chromosome. If an X-bearing sperm fertilizes the ovum, the baby will be a girl, XX. If a Y-bearing sperm fertilizes the ovum, the baby will be a boy. Now let's move on to the second stage of embryological development, which is called cleavage. This stage usually occurs from day 1 to day 3 after fertilization. So, what is cleavage? Cleavage is a process in which the zygote undergoes rapid mitotic cell division. In simple words, the single-celled zygote starts dividing again and again to produce many new cells. One interesting point to remember is that although the number of cells keeps increasing, the overall size does not increase. The embryo remains almost the same size because the original cell is simply dividing into smaller and smaller cells. For example, one cell becomes 2 cells, then 4 cells, then 8 cells, then 16 cells, and the divisions continue rapidly. Now, what are these newly formed cells called? These cells are known as blastomeres. So every cell produced during the cleavage stage is called a blastomere. This stage is very important because it increases the number of cells needed for the baby's growth, even though the embryo itself does not become bigger at this stage. So remember these 3 important points. Cleavage is the rapid mitotic division of the zygote. The number of cells increases, but the size of the embryo remains the same. The cells formed during cleavage are called blastomeres. In the next stage, we'll see how these blastomeres come together to form a structure called the morula. Now let's move on to the third stage of embryological development, called the Morula Stage. This stage usually occurs between day 3 and day 4 after fertilization. After the zygote undergoes repeated cleavage, the number of cells keeps increasing. By this stage, the embryo contains about 16 to 32 cells. These cells are tightly packed together, forming a solid ball of cells. This solid mass is called the morula. Now, you may wonder why it's called a morula. The word morula comes from the Latin word for mulberry, because this stage looks very similar to a mulberry fruit. If you look at the picture, you can see that it appears as a small, round cluster of cells. During the morula stage, the embryo is still traveling through the fallopian tube. By the end of this stage, it reaches and enters the uterine cavity, where it will continue its development. So, remember these important points. The The Morula stage occurs around day 3 to day 4. It consists of about 16 to 32 cells. It is a solid ball of cells that resembles a mulberry. During this stage, the developing embryo enters the uterine cavity. In the next stage, we'll see how the morula changes into a blastocyst, which is the stage that prepares for implantation in the uterus. Now, let's move on to the 4th stage of embryological development, which is the blastocyst stage. This stage usually occurs between day 5 and day 6 after fertilization. By this time, the morula undergoes further changes and becomes a blastocyst. Unlike the morula, which is a solid ball of cells, the blastocyst has a fluid-filled cavity inside it. This makes it look hollow. The blastocyst has 3 important parts. Let's understand each one. The first part is the trophoblast. The trophoblast is the outer layer of cells. Its main function is to form the placenta. Later, the placenta will provide oxygen and nutrients to the developing baby throughout pregnancy. The second part is the embryoblast, also called the inner cell mass. This group of cells is very important because it develops into the embryo, which later grows into the fetus. In simple words, the embryoblast forms the baby. The third part is the blastocyst cavity. This is the fluid-filled space present inside the blastocyst. It provides space for the cells to organize and continue their development. So remember these 3 parts very clearly. The trophoblast forms the placenta, the embryoblast forms the embryo or the baby, and the blastocyst cavity is the fluid-filled space inside the blastocyst. This is a very important stage because the blastocyst is now ready for the next step, which is implantation into the wall of the uterus. Now, let's discuss the 5th stage of embryological development, which is implantation. This stage usually takes place between day 6 and day 10 after fertilization. So, what is implantation? Implantation is the process by which the blastocyst attaches itself to the lining of the uterus. This uterine lining is called the endometrium. You can think of implantation as the blastocyst finding a safe place to settle and grow. Once it attaches to the uterus, the pregnancy becomes established. Now, where does implantation usually occur? It normally occurs on the upper posterior wall of the uterus. This is the most common and ideal site because it provides a good blood supply and enough space for the baby to grow throughout pregnancy. Next, let's see what happens during implantation. The outer layer of the blastocyst, called the trophoblast, starts invading or penetrating the uterine lining. This helps the blastocyst become firmly attached to the endometrium. As the trophoblast continues to grow into the uterine lining, it gradually forms the placenta. The placenta will later supply oxygen and nutrients to the developing baby. So, remember these important points. Implantation occurs between day 6 and day 10. The blastocyst attaches to the endometrium. The normal site of implantation is the upper posterior wall of the uterus. The trophoblast invades the uterine lining and helps establish pregnancy by forming the placenta. This is a very important stage because successful implantation marks the beginning of a healthy pregnancy. Without implantation, the embryo cannot continue its growth and development. Now, let's move on to week 3 of embryological development. During this week, one of the most important events takes place. This process is called gastrulation. So what is gastrulation? Gastrulation is the process by which the developing embryo forms 3 primary germ layers. These 3 germ layers are very important because every organ and tissue in our body develops from them. Today, in this slide, we'll discuss the first germ layer, which is the ectoderm. The ectoderm is the outermost germ layer. You can easily remember it by thinking, ecto means outside. Now what does the ectoderm form? The ectoderm mainly forms the nervous system and the outer covering of the body. It develops into the brain and the spinal cord, which together make up the central nervous system. It also forms the nerves that carry messages between the brain, spinal cord, and the rest of the body. In addition, the ectoderm gives rise to the skin, hair, and nails, which protect our body. It also forms important parts of the eyes, helping in the development of vision. So whenever you hear the word ectoderm, immediately think of the nervous system and the body's outer covering. In the previous slide, we learned about the ectoderm. Now let's discuss the remaining 2 germ layers, the mesoderm and the endoderm. Let's start with the mesoderm. The mesoderm is the middle germ layer. An easy way to remember this is, meso means middle. The mesoderm mainly forms the supporting structures of the body and the circulatory system. It develops into the muscles, which help in body movement. It also forms the bones, which give shape and support to our body. The heart also develops from the mesoderm. In fact, the heart is one of the first organs to start functioning during embryonic development. The mesoderm also forms the blood vessels, which carry blood throughout the body. Another important organ formed from the mesoderm is the kidneys, which help remove waste products and maintain fluid balance. Finally, the reproductive organs, such as the ovaries in females and the testes in males, also develop from the mesoderm. So whenever you hear the word mesoderm, think of the body's support and movement system. A simple way to remember it is, mesoderm forms muscles, bones, heart, blood vessels, kidneys, and reproductive organs. Now let's move on to the third germ layer, the endoderm. The endoderm is the innermost germ layer. You can remember it easily because endo means inside. The endoderm mainly forms the inner lining of many internal organs. It forms the lining of the digestive tract, beginning from the stomach and intestines. It also forms important digestive organs like the liver and the pancreas. In addition, the endoderm gives rise to the lining of the lungs, which later helps in breathing after birth. The thyroid and parathyroid glands also develop from the endoderm. These glands play important roles in regulating metabolism and maintaining calcium levels in the body. So, remember this simple rule. Endoderm forms the inside organs. It forms the lining of the digestive tract, liver, pancreas, lungs, and the thyroid and parathyroid glands. Now, let's discuss another important event in embryological development called neurulation. This process takes place during week 3 to week 4 of pregnancy. So, what is neurulation? Neurulation is the process by which the neural tube is formed. The neural tube develops from the ectoderm, which is the outermost germ layer that we learned about in the previous slide. Now, why is the neural tube so important? The neural tube is the structure that later develops into the baby's brain and spinal cord. So this stage marks the beginning of the formation of the central nervous system. During normal development, the neural tube gradually folds and closes completely. This closure is very important because it allows the brain and spinal cord to develop normally. But what happens if the neural tube does not close properly? If the neural tube fails to close, it leads to conditions called neural tube defects. These are congenital abnormalities that occur during early pregnancy. Two important examples are shown on this slide. The first is spina bifida. In spina bifida, the lower part of the neural tube does not close properly. As a result, the spinal cord and its coverings may protrude through an opening in the backbone. Depending on the severity, it can cause weakness of the legs, difficulty in walking, or problems with bowel and bladder control. The second example is anencephaly. In anencephaly, the upper part of the neural tube fails to close. Because of this, a major portion of the brain and skull does not develop properly. Unfortunately, this condition is not compatible with life. So remember these important points. Neurulation occurs during week 3 to week 4. The neural tube develops from the ectoderm. The neural tube forms the brain and spinal cord. Failure of neural tube closure causes neural tube defects, such as spina bifida and anencephaly. One important clinical point for you to remember is that taking folic acid before conception and during early pregnancy greatly reduces the risk of neural tube defects. This is why women planning for pregnancy are advised to take folic acid supplements even before they conceive. Now let's move on to another very important stage of embryological development, called organogenesis. This stage occurs from week 4 to week 8 of pregnancy. The word organogenesis simply means the formation of organs. During this period, all the major organs of the baby's body begin to develop. One of the earliest organs to function is the heart. The baby's heart starts beating around day 22 after fertilization. Although the heart is very tiny at this stage, it begins pumping blood to support the developing embryo. As development continues, small projections called limb buds appear. These limb buds will gradually develop into the baby's arms and legs. During this period, the eyes and ears also begin to develop. Initially, they appear as small structures, but over the next few weeks, they continue to grow and differentiate into fully developed organs. Now, why is this period so important? Week 4 to week 8 is considered the most critical period of embryonic development, because all the major organs are forming during this time. Since the organs are developing rapidly, the embryo is highly sensitive to harmful substances. Exposure to certain drugs, infections, alcohol, smoking, or radiation during this period can interfere with normal organ development and may lead to congenital anomalies or birth defects. That is why pregnant women are always advised to avoid self-medication, alcohol, smoking, unnecessary X-rays, and exposure to harmful chemicals, especially during the first trimester. So, remember these important points. Organogenesis occurs from week 4 to week 8. During this period, all the major organs begin to develop. The heart starts beating around day 22. Limb buds appear, and the eyes and ears begin to develop. Most importantly, this is the most critical period of pregnancy, because the risk of congenital anomalies is highest if the embryo is exposed to harmful substances. Now let's discuss the embryonic period, which extends from week 3 to week 8 of pregnancy. This is one of the most important stages of fetal development, because during this period, the embryo changes rapidly, and all the major organs of the body begin to develop. By the end of the 8th week, the basic structure of almost every organ is already formed. Although these organs are still small and immature, they will continue to grow and mature during the rest of the pregnancy. Another important point about this period is that the embryo is highly sensitive to teratogens. Now, what are teratogens? Teratogens are harmful substances or factors that can interfere with the normal development of the embryo and cause congenital anomalies or birth defects. Examples of teratogens include certain medications, alcohol, smoking, infections such as rubella, radiation, harmful chemicals, and some environmental toxins. Since the organs are developing during this period, exposure to these harmful substances can seriously affect the baby's growth and organ formation. The last point is rapid growth and differentiation. During the embryonic period, the embryo not only grows quickly in size, but also undergoes differentiation. Differentiation means that the cells become specialized to perform different functions. For example, some cells develop into heart cells, some become nerve cells, some form muscles, while others develop into bones and skin. This specialization is essential because each organ needs different types of cells to function properly. So remember these important points. The embryonic period extends from week 3 to week 8. During this period, all the major organs begin to develop. The embryo is highly sensitive to teratogens, so this is the period with the greatest risk of congenital anomalies. Rapid growth and differentiation take place, allowing cells to become specialized and form different organs and tissues. So you can remember this stage with one simple sentence. The embryonic period is the period of organ formation and the period of highest sensitivity to harmful substances. Now let's move on to the final stage of prenatal development, which is the fetal period. This period begins from week 9 and continues until birth. Up to the end of week 8, the developing baby is called an embryo. From week 9 onwards, it is called a fetus. Now, what happens during the fetal period? Unlike the embryonic period where the organs are formed, the fetal period is mainly a period of growth and maturation. The fetus grows rapidly in both size and weight. Month by month, the baby becomes bigger and stronger. During this stage, the organs that were formed earlier continue to mature and become functional. For example, the heart continues to pump blood effectively, the kidneys start producing urine, and the digestive system continues to develop. Another exciting event during this period is fetal movement. As the muscles and nervous system develop, the fetus starts moving inside the uterus. Initially, these movements are very small, but later the mother begins to feel them. This first perception of fetal movement by the mother is called quickening, which is usually felt around 18 to 20 weeks in first-time mothers, and slightly earlier in women who have been pregnant before. Another important change is fat deposition. Fat starts getting deposited under the baby's skin. This helps the baby maintain body temperature after birth and gives the baby a healthy appearance. Finally, the lungs continue to mature throughout pregnancy. By the end of pregnancy, the lungs are developed enough to function after birth. This is essential, because immediately after delivery, the baby must breathe independently. Now we have reached the final slide, where we'll do a quick revision of the important milestones in embryological development. This is a very useful slide because it summarizes the entire topic in chronological order. If you can remember this sequence, you'll be able to answer many exam questions easily. Let's go through it step by step. On day 1, fertilization takes place. The sperm and ovum unite to form the first cell of the baby, called the zygote. By day 2 to day 3, the zygote starts dividing rapidly. This process is called cleavage, where the number of cells increases without an increase in the size of the embryo. By day 3 to day 4, these cells form a solid ball called the morula, which resembles a mulberry. By day 5 to day 6, the morula develops into a blastocyst. The blastocyst has a fluid-filled cavity and is ready to attach to the uterus. From day 6 to day 10, implantation takes place. During this stage, the blastocyst attaches to the endometrium, and pregnancy becomes established. In week 3, gastrulation occurs. During this process, the 3 primary germ layers, Ectoderm, Mesoderm, and Endoderm, are formed. These germ layers will later give rise to all the organs and tissues of the body. During week 3 to week 4, neurulation takes place. The neural tube develops from the ectoderm and later forms the brain and spinal cord. From week 4 to week 8, organogenesis occurs. This is the stage during which all the major organs begin to develop. It is also the most critical period because the embryo is highly sensitive to harmful substances. Finally, from week 9 until birth, the baby enters the fetal period. During this stage, the fetus grows rapidly in size and weight, the organs mature, and the body prepares for life outside the uterus. Now let's discuss the clinical importance of embryological development. You may wonder why we need to study embryology in nursing. Understanding embryological development is very important because it helps us understand how a baby grows and develops inside the mother's uterus. It also helps us identify when something is not developing normally. First, it explains the normal development of the baby. When we know the normal stages of development, we can easily understand whether the fetus is growing according to its gestational age. This knowledge is essential while caring for pregnant women. Next, it helps identify congenital anomalies. If there is any problem during embryonic development, it can result in birth defects or congenital anomalies. By understanding embryology, healthcare professionals can identify these abnormalities early and plan appropriate management. Another important point is that it is essential for antenatal care. During antenatal visits, nurses educate mothers about proper nutrition, the importance of folic acid supplementation, regular checkups, vaccinations, and avoiding harmful substances. All these measures help ensure normal fetal development. Embryology is also useful in prenatal diagnosis. Today, many congenital abnormalities can be detected before birth using investigations such as ultrasound, fetal echocardiography, chorionic villus sampling, and amniocentesis. Knowledge of embryological development helps healthcare professionals understand these findings and counsel parents appropriately. Finally, embryology helps us understand the effects of teratogens during pregnancy. Teratogens are harmful substances such as certain medications, alcohol, smoking, infections, radiation, and harmful chemicals that can interfere with normal fetal development. Knowing the stages of embryological development helps us understand when the fetus is most vulnerable and why pregnant women should avoid these harmful exposures. Before we conclude this topic, let's quickly revise some important exam points. These are the facts that are commonly asked in university exams, viva, and competitive nursing examinations. The first point is the site of fertilization. Remember, fertilization normally occurs in the ampulla of the fallopian tube. This is one of the most frequently asked questions in exams, so don't forget it. The second point is about the zygote. The zygote is the first cell of the new individual. It is formed when the sperm and the ovum unite during fertilization. From this single cell, the entire baby develops. The third point is about the morula. The morula is a solid ball of cells that contains about 16 to 32 cells. It resembles a mulberry and develops around day 3 to day 4 after fertilization. The next important point is about the blastocyst. The blastocyst is formed from the morula and has two main cell components. The outer layer is called the trophoblast, which later develops into the placenta. The inner cell mass is called the embryoblast, and it develops into the embryo. Remember that implantation occurs about 6 to 10 days after fertilization. During this stage, the blastocyst attaches to the endometrium, and pregnancy becomes established. Next is gastrulation. Gastrulation is the process that forms the three primary germ layers: ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. These three layers later develop into all the organs and tissues of the body. The next important point is organogenesis. Organogenesis occurs during week 4 to week 8 of pregnancy. This is the period when all the major organs begin to develop. It is one of the most important timelines to remember for your examinations. Now, let's talk about the embryonic period. The embryonic period is considered the most vulnerable period for congenital anomalies. Why? Because this is the time when the organs are developing rapidly. If the embryo is exposed to harmful substances such as certain drugs, alcohol, infections, radiation, or harmful chemicals during this stage, it can lead to birth defects. Finally, remember the fetal period. The fetal period begins from week 9 and continues until birth. During this stage, the organs that have already formed continue to grow, mature, and become fully functional. The fetus also increases in size and weight as it prepares for life outside the uterus. So before we end, let's do one final quick revision. Implantation occurs 6 to 10 days after fertilization. Gastrulation forms the three germ layers. Organogenesis occurs during week 4 to week 8. The embryonic period is the most vulnerable period for congenital anomalies. The fetal period begins from week 9 and continues until birth. That's the end of this video. If you liked this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more nursing learning videos. Thank you for watching, and keep learning.